It's Sunday, November 24, 2024. I'm Anthony Davis. Welcome to The Weekend Show, where we make the time to consider the news of the week. You can support my work and independent journalism at patreon.com/5minutenews. Our guest today is a former Secretary of Labor, Professor of Public Policy at UC Berkeley, and co-founder of Inequality Media. Robert Reich, welcome to The Weekend Show.
Well, thank you for having me. Anthony, however you want to pronounce your name.
I'll take whatever at this stage. There's far too many other issues to worry about, not least the election. I read your Substack and your blogs, and you wrote one the other day entitled "There was no mandate for Trump. There was no red shift. There was only a blue abandonment." Before we get into kind of the weeds of his cabinet picks and everything else that's happened in the last week or so, maybe we could just talk about this, because I think that, a lot of Democrats and liberal people are feeling a great sadness right now and are struggling to kind of even talk about it. And yet, as the popular vote is continuing to be counted, it wasn't really a landslide for Trump at all, was it?
No, and it's very important to keep this in mind. Trump does not have a mandate. Actually, what we saw in 2024 is a little bit of what we saw in 2020 and 2016. That is a small group going back and forth between Republicans and Democrats. And in 2024, the real difference is that fewer people voted. We have something in the order, now we don't know exactly, but something in the order of 8 to 9 million fewer voters than we've had before. And we can get into that, Anthony, if you want, as to what some theories are about that. But the more important point for this part of the discussion is that Trump did not have and does not have a mandate.
And that's contrary to what he's saying, of course. He is claiming that, it was a landslide win. And with that, it's almost giving him an extra excuse to kind of double down on the authoritarianism. And we're seeing that with these cabinet appointments, with people that are so unsuitable for their roles, that it's clear that he's trying to deconstruct the administrative state by just making it crap. And I think that really is at the heart of what he's doing. Do you think it's that, or is it more sinister?
I think it's more sinister. He's putting these people up, creating a great deal of consternation, outrage, just a kind of an emotional reaction, all told. I mean, many Republicans are also appalled by the quality of these potential nominees. But you have to understand there is also something else going on simultaneously, and that is that Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy are put in charge by Trump of finding so-called efficiencies, whatever that word means to various people. But what it means to Trump and many Republicans is finding things to cut, most likely Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, the three big programs outside the Defense Department. Musk is not going to cut defense because, after all, he is one of the major defense contractors through his SpaceX and his satellite business. But we've got to keep this in mind. There is going to be also a big tax cut. Trump has promised all of the people who supported him, the billionaires, the wealthy who put a lot of money, invested it in his campaign, invested it for a return. And that return on that investment is another big tax cut, an extension of the 2017 tax cut that went into effect in January 2018, which was disproportionately benefited people who are very rich and big corporations.
I want to talk, before we kind of get into the weeds of the economy, I want to talk about what he calls the deep state, because arguably you worked for the deep state under President Clinton, and we could really expose and explain to people who don't understand what it is, that it's just the federal government. I mean, that's what he's talking about when he describes the deep state. Could you explain the difference between a functioning federal government with people in it with experience who kind of understand their non-partisan role in government versus what Trump is creating, which is this extreme far-right Christian nationalist version of a government.
Well, white Christian nationalism is behind it all. Trump is the vehicle for it. But what he wants to do is strip government of its expertise. In fact, the word expert is something that Trump and many of the people who follow Trump denigrate. They don't like people who are so-called experts. They don't want people who know a great deal about what they are really supervising or doing. And so Trump's view of the so-called deep state is that you have all of these expert bureaucrats, and what he wants to do is get rid of them and substitute Trump loyalists. Now, Trump loyalists are people who don't necessarily owe allegiance to the United States, but owe allegiance to Donald Trump. And that's going to be a big issue, not only with regard to substituting his loyalists for the civil service, but also for the confirmation process, because many of the people he wants to be put in the cabinet and other critical places in the government have more loyalty to Donald Trump than they do to the United States, to the citizens of the United States, the Constitution of the United States.
The word bureaucrats, I mean, the semantics of this are interesting, aren't they? Because words like bureaucrats have become kind of dirty words, even though they're really not. And bureaucracy is entirely necessary in government by nature of the fact that it's not a business. You can't run it like a business. And that really has been the argument that we've heard from so many Trump supporters, is that he's a businessman, and if we ran it like a business, there wouldn't be so much waste. And can you explain why you don't want to run a country like a business?
Well, the country is not a business. It's not out to make a profit. It doesn't sell shares of stock. You want it to be as efficient as possible, obviously, in terms of doing the public's business, getting services out to people. But you don't want to cut unnecessarily. You don't want to make it so that a lot of people are harmed by what is cut. That's the big fear I have, because you see, by thinking about government as a so-called bureaucracy with a lot of fat that needs to be trimmed, a business that could be much more efficient, what you forget is that government really is a vehicle for helping people in need, or for preventing them from falling through the cracks and getting very, very harmed, very, very hurt in the process. Government is also a vehicle for investing in human resources, in education and job training, in all of the ways that we build productivity, including also infrastructure. In other words, while profit-making businesses may be contracted with to do the government's work, the actual work itself, the purpose of government, is not to create just an efficient business.
But all those things that you describe, supporting people, protecting people, educating people, infrastructure, none of those things sit in Donald Trump and the GOP's camp, do they? They don't advocate for any of that stuff. And getting them to join up and sign up with these infrastructure bills that have come and gone was pretty hard work on behalf of President Biden. And obviously they'll take the credit for it in their states when a new bridge is built. But that really is the antithesis of what Trump stands for.
Absolutely. But he does, in practice, take money that is from campaign donors and from gifts, in the form of gifts and every other form, and provide quid pro quos, provide people what they want in terms of tax cuts or subsidies or regulatory relief, so-called. Trump is very transactional. It's not as if we're dealing with somebody who operates by a set of principles, even if those principles might be efficiency. It's not efficiency. What Trump is operating by is a transaction in which he gains power or money, and in return for which his supplicants give him what he wants, and they get back favors. He's been doing that all his life. And this is just a continuation. His first term in office, he was constrained a bit in those transactions by some people who had some principles, who he appointed to various positions and who had some expertise. In this second term of Trump, there are no constraints. There is no one I can't see. I mean, he's not even surrounding himself with anybody who has any idea of the public interest. Even the word public interest or the words public interest or the common good probably have not been uttered in Mar-a-Lago ever.
The former German Chancellor Angela Merkel said very similar to what you've just said in her book that came out this week, talking about how she misjudged him as a normal person. She kind of treated him as a normal person. He famously refused to shake her hand in the Oval Office, and there was this awkward kind of eggy moment during that. But she described the transactional nature. He doesn't understand that countries can work together for mutual benefit. He thinks that there has to be a winner.
Everything for him, and we saw this in the first term, is a matter of a zero-sum game in which one side, he or his country, wins, and the other side, the people he's dealing with, lose. You cannot have a win-win situation with Donald Trump.
So let's go back to his win. And there are still plenty of people that I know that can't yet come to terms with it and are waiting for the inauguration and be like, okay, that's when he'll officially be the president. And anything could happen between now and then, as we know, with daily scandals. But a lot of people really fell for his charms, didn't they? I mean, he basically told them a whole bunch of lies, and people weren't able to see through it, or maybe their sense of, because inflation is at the heart of this, isn't it? You know, the idea that goods are more expensive at the moment, and that he kind of was taking ownership for the fact that when he was president last time, life was cheaper, and now it's more expensive, and he will make it cheaper again, which he really can't, can he? Well,
he certainly cannot do that. And if he puts up tariffs around the United States, everything is going to get much more expensive. His illusion, I don't know whether he believes this or whether he's sort of persuaded himself or whether he's trying to con America. The illusion he's dealing with is that somehow consumers don't pay tariffs, but they do. Consumers will be paying more money for all the goods they buy from around the world. It's a totally integrated global economy right now. And if Trump does put up tariffs, everything becomes more expensive. He was trying to sell to the country the notion that it was better before. But even that was a bit of a con, because if you look at just the data, we know that the United States lost about 2 million jobs under Trump. The economy, even before the pandemic, was not really all that good. Wages were still quite stagnant. Inflation had not yet robbed Americans of a lot of their wages in terms of the real cost of living, but that inflation was the product in a sense of the pandemic and the failure of the Trump administration to deal as quickly and as well with the public health crisis as it should have. So as a result, so many people were in such dire straits. It was the responsibility of government to come to the aid of the public. And I think when the history of these years is written, finally, Anthony, people will say, well, the government did exactly what it should do, and there was a period of inflation, but the Fed and the Federal Reserve Board did what it should do. It raised interest rates a bit, not in a panic, and the Biden administration also kept the wheels of government going and made a lot of very important public investments in terms of semiconductors and infrastructure and green energy. And there is going to be a payoff, already has been a payoff from those investments. And so government functioned actually extremely well post Donald Trump.
But people don't really understand much of that, do they? Or they've maybe have selective memory. He erased the pandemic from his campaign. He didn't really ever talk about that the pandemic with supply chain issues cause a worldwide inflationary activity that meant that all countries were going through this same stuff. And I suppose this whole isolationist attitude to communication that he has, it kind of ignores the fact that there is the rest of the world who were going through exactly the same stuff, as many countries go through the same issues with immigration. And yet it feels like it is only really happening here. So this kind of selective memory, the erasing of the pandemic, do you think the Democrats did enough to seize on that and explain to people that the pandemic is the reason that prices went up, and that currently prices are coming down, inflation is coming down, interest rates are coming down, and that the economy right now is probably going to be as good as it's going to be maybe for another decade?
Yes, and Trump is going to take credit for that economy.
As he did with Obama's economy.
Exactly. There's another factor, though, Anthony, and that is that so many Americans, this is true of much of the rest of the world as well, the advanced countries, the advanced economies, but so many Americans have faced stagnant or declining real wages, adjusted for inflation, for many decades. By some measures, beginning in the late 70s, early 1980s. And, the basic bargain of the American economy used to be, and I am old enough to remember this from the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, that if you worked hard and if you played by the rules, if you did what you were supposed to do, you would do better and better throughout your working life. Your wages would increase. You would be able to afford a home. And then your children could either go to college or not, but they would do better even than you did. That was the basic bargain. That was the so-called American dream. But beginning in the late 70s or early 80s, that bargain came apart. Most of the gains from the economy went to the top. Wages stagnated. And I think there's a kind of cumulative anger at a system that seems rigged against average working people. And Trump tapped into that anger. He exploited that anger. The Democrats failed to give any alternative explanation for what happened. They did not say, well, their labor unions fell apart. We used to have a third of the private sector workers in unions, but now only 6% are in unions. Well, companies, big corporations have been fighting unions since Ronald Reagan. Big corporations have been monopolizing. They have much more monopoly power than they have ever had, at least certainly since the 1920s. And that monopoly power is largely responsible for very high prices. And also wealthy people have been corrupting this country in terms of paying for a kind of a legalized system of bribery, paying for the senators and members of Congress and the governors and other representatives they want to make their lives better so that they can get subsidized and bailed out if they're bankers. I mean, look what happened during the 2008 banking crisis. Well, Democrats could have said that and should have said that. But the failure of Democrats to articulate that critique, which is a true critique, allowed Donald Trump and his henchmen and lapdogs and followers to enunciate a fake critique, which blamed immigrants, blamed undocumented workers, blamed the deep state, blamed coastal elites, and on and on and on and on. And that, I think, is a big part of what actually occurred.
I completely agree. But I want to talk more about this because I think the cost of living going up and wages staying the same or remaining stagnant is at the heart of so much of the kind of dysfunction and the dispossession surrounding this American dream that I came here for. Certainly, we've got to take a quick break, but we'll come back and do that next here on The Weekend Show. And now a message from me to you that comes from the heart, and I'm talking about the actual heart. Yes, the makers of Superbeats Heart Chews believe the cardiovascular system is the force that unlocks the best parts of life, and your heart is at its center. Paired with a healthy lifestyle, the antioxidants in Super Beets are clinically shown to be nearly 2 times more effective at promoting normal blood pressure than a healthy lifestyle alone. I, personally, want to be around for my kids for many, many more years, and it's great to know that I'm doing something good for myself every day. Cardiovascular health matters because it connects your heart to every part of your body. Trusted by cardiologists right across the country and real people like you. The #1 doctor, pharmacist, and cardiologist recommended Beet brand for cardiovascular health support and the clinically studied ingredients to help you support your cardiovascular health. Super Beets are a convenient way to support healthy blood pressure with no pills to swallow, no ingredients to mix or prepare, just simple, plant-based active ingredients. Power the moments your heart beats for with Super Beets Heart Chews and get 15% off and save even more on bundles using code WEEKEND at getsuperbeets.com. That's getsuperbeets.com and use code WEEKEND. We're back on the Weekend Show with Robert Reich. I'm Anthony Davis. Robert, we're talking about inflation and the cost of living, and I was saying earlier that this really is at the very heart of not just America's problems, but this goes right around the world. There are some countries, some Scandinavian countries, where they've actually managed to make social democracies work to the point that, yeah, you pay a little more tax, but your quality of life goes through the roof compared to what we enjoy here in the USA. So, if the system is broken, and there is consensus that the system is broken, is the issue that Trump claimed that it was broken, that he could fix it, but the Democrats didn't acknowledge that it was broken? Because that really is the differential, isn't it? You know, we're all in agreement that it's broken, and yet there didn't seem to be much talk about wanting to have a do-over.
Well, I think the Democrats are reluctant to say it's broken and explain why. And this is an old problem for the Democrats. Certainly, it starts in the 1980s when Tony Coelho, who was then the chairman of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, decided that the Democrats would basically raise money from wealthy people and from big corporations, because Democrats were going to be in power, he thought, in Congress, run Congress, control Congress for years to come. And so there was no problem in doing that. But it was a devil's bargain. It was a Faustian bargain. It was the kind of bargain that really undermined the integrity of the Democratic Party. It was no longer possible after the 1990s for the Democrats to take on big corporations and take on the wealthy and say, you've got to pay more in taxes, or you can't get bailed out every time you get into trouble. We're not going to subsidize you any longer. We're not going to treat you wealthy people and you corporations any differently than anybody else. In fact, you have some responsibilities to the rest of the nation, and you are the beneficiaries of this nation. Well, the Democrats could not do that because they didn't want to bite the hands that fed them. And that is the sad irony of the Democratic Party. Yeah, the Republican Party had absolutely no qualms about doing that. And the Republican Party, took all the money from the wealthy and from big corporations, and proceeded to not blame the actual sources of the systemic problems, that is monopolies and the power of big money, but instead started blaming Black people and Latinos and immigrants and undocumented people and the deep state and every bogeyman you can imagine. You see, the problem is structurally that if the American people who know that there's a structural problem, they know the system is not working, they know it's rigged, if they hear an explanation from one party, the Republican Party, even though that explanation is wrong, it's baseless, it is kind of cynical, but there is no explanation from the Democratic Party that is real and true and powerful, well, they're going to go with the Republican Party.
Kamala Harris was given plenty of opportunities to say this stuff, wasn't she? And even when she was asked what she would do differently to Joe Biden, she said nothing. these moments are quite difficult for many of us to process because there's so much to say. And also there's so much to pin on the Republicans and on Donald Trump and the corruption. So much to talk about. And yet it was very kind of one tone.
Yes. I do want to say, though, she was a really remarkable campaigner.
Yeah, I agree with that too.
That debate that she did with
Donald Trump, she nailed it. Yeah,
she totally nailed it. I also want to point out that unlike Bill Clinton, and I was very proud to have been in his cabinet, and I think we accomplished some very important things. But unlike Bill Clinton and unlike Barack Obama, Joe Biden did come out much more aggressively for workers, for labor, much more aggressively on the antitrust, anti-monopoly front. He was really closer in terms of his ideology to the old Democratic Party, the Franklin D. Roosevelt Democratic Party, than he was to Bill Clinton or to Barack Obama. But he had a very difficult time, for a variety of reasons, expressing all of that. He had, some of it was physical, some of it was his age. He was just not a very good messenger. And I think by the time Kamala Harris came to her little 3-month window, and it really was a tiny window to mount a presidential campaign, she didn't have the, I don't know what you want to describe it, whether it's the courage or the conviction or the ability to call it like it is. I mean, she didn't want to blame the corporations. She didn't want to
upset Biden either, because she felt that he'd given her this opportunity.
Exactly. She didn't want to upset Biden. She didn't want to upset her funding sources. So she was constrained. I don't think she should have been. It's easy to be a Monday morning quarterback on all of this, but it's done.
I agree that she was not a great candidate, but she'd make a great president. And this, there is a difference. Trump is a great candidate, but a terrible president.
Well, Trump is a terrible person. I don't think you can be a great candidate if you're a terrible person.
But he's a showman, so he knows how to play to the camera. He knows how to work the audience, all the stuff that...
He's not even a showman. He's a con man. I mean, this is true. He is really his one talent, and it is only one talent, is his ability to con, to make people believe that he's telling the truth. When in fact he's lying, and he repeatedly. I mean, a con man, a really great con man, tells the same lie over and over again in 100 different ways, but is consistent in his lying, and he is entertaining at the same time. I mean, people enjoyed listening to Donald Trump, as amazing as it might be. And I want to emphasize once again that Trump provided people with a reason for why their wages were stagnant, why prices were high, why they were so discontented, and the Democrats did not.
Ironically, Trump is the 1% who's been stealing all the money the whole time. And he really only represents that tiny percentage that... This is why the con is so clever, because he claims to be a man of the people and they bought it, and yet he was born on a gold toilet.
Well, not only was he born on a gold toilet and still has one, but he also represents the American oligarchy. There are 818 billionaires in America. Many of them supported his presidency. He's putting many of them in power in various places. Elon Musk is a kind of exemplar of all of this. And what they want more than anything else is not only tax cuts, and he's going to give them tax cuts, and they want regulatory so-called relief, and he's going to get rid of a lot of regulations, but they also want Americans to be angry with each other so we don't look up and see where all the money and power has actually gone. One of the Republican, and it is primarily a Trump Republican vehicles for keeping the wealthy even wealthier, making them even better off, making the billionaires, they've become 20 to 30% wealthier just over the last couple of weeks. because the share values of so many of their firms has gone soaring in the expectation of tax cuts for corporations and also regulatory relief. One of the things that is so basic to the Trump technique for rewarding the rich is to disguise what they are getting and do it because Americans are so angry at people on the other side. Democrats at Republicans, Republicans at Democrats. At the ground level, I'm talking.
It's like a whirlwind, isn't it? Because when you know the secret, when you can see through Trump, it's very clear what he's doing. The scam is quite obvious. But unfortunately, the electorate, most of whom are not engaged in politics, they don't give him the kind of analysis that we do. And so he really can say anything. I want to talk about the tax cuts that he claims that he gave last time and is going to give them again. I mean, he didn't really cut any taxes for anybody other than corporations the first time round. He didn't really make America great again the first time round.
No,
and yet he's projecting that he did.
Yes, it was trickle-down economics. It was the same thing Ronald Reagan did, the same thing George W. Bush did. Fool me once, fool me twice. Well, this was the third round. The federal budget deficit and the national debt exploded because of these three rounds of tax cuts, mostly tax cuts on the very wealthy. And you look at what happened to income taxes and every other form of tax, capital gains taxes, they have all, under Reagan and George W. Bush and Donald Trump, been reduced dramatically. There's no secret to why there is a federal budget deficit or a debt. There shouldn't be. But you say, Anthony, that Donald Trump's genius is that he has conned people, that he's told them a story that we should be able to see through. But I want to go back to this point about the Democrats, because if the Democrats don't say anything, I mean, who is the Democratic spokesperson right now? I mean, Joe Biden has disappeared. Kamala Harris has disappeared. Who speaks for the Democrats? Who is the loyal opposition? Who is making the case that we are now talking about? The answer is nobody. So Donald Trump is unconstrained. He feels like he got a mandate. You and I both know he didn't. He has a Congress that is now under his control, pretty much. He's got a Supreme Court that is supine and tractable. It's going to be doing whatever he wants. It's already been doing whatever he wants. He doesn't have to run for office again. In fact, he may not under the Constitution, although he may try to keep power. So what is there to constrain Donald Trump now? There is nothing. There is not even a Democratic spokesperson. There's not even a Democratic voice out there, capital D.
It's hard, isn't it? Because Kamala Harris is still the vice president, and she stepped up to be the candidate and lost. And so she, I presume, feels that she doesn't have a mandate to speak up right now. Biden is trying to get stuff through before his term is up and is, busy walking in the wrong direction in the Amazon jungle. And we are left with this void, which is partly where independent journalism has kind of risen. And I think we're beginning to realize with the work that you do and the work that we do, that the corporate media has kind of failed to call Trump out as well. Let's just talk about that for a moment, because this is the time when people need to be led. They need to be informed and educated about what's happening. We tried to warn, didn't we? We had our duty and we did so. The risk of a second Trump presidency would be so detrimental to the safety and security and prosperity of America. People didn't listen. So what is our job now?
Well, our job, your job and my job, is to do what we are now trying to do, and that is make sure that people understand the truth. But you talk about the corporate media. America, you can't have a democracy when people like Elon Musk are in control of major media platforms that people had relied on for news and for facts. X has become just a cesspool of of lies, of dangerous lies, of lies of the kind of lies that Donald Trump has been telling forever. Fox News, Rupert Murdoch's holdings have become equally, in fact, they've been for years, cesspools of lies. And then the corporate media. I mean, can you really rely on the Washington Post when Jeff Bezos tells the editorial board of the Post, no, you cannot support Kamala Harris. You can't endorse her because I don't want you to. I have a lot of other business interests. He didn't say that exactly, but that's probably why he didn't want the Post to do it. So if you're an average person in America and you are trying to get the truth and you're trying to understand what is actually happening and why, it is exceedingly difficult, particularly if the media is not telling you and if there is no loyal opposition that has any leadership that's willing to tell you.
And I find it interesting. I read a lot of the comments, I'm sure you do too, when we make these videos, that, yeah, I mean, the people who get it and have always got it and are devastated at where the country is going. But the people that support Trump but do consume our content, they think that we're the liars. They think that we're the propagandists. And they are so brainwashed into the cult of MAGA that, I mean, their bubble is going to burst in a big way in a few months' time, isn't it?
Well, we'll see. I mean, I don't know how long you can keep the con going. To some extent, Donald Trump maintained his big con right through his first term and then through the Biden administration. I mean, he never disappeared. He's been there saying crazy things and telling lies on X or on Truth Social or wherever he can, and certainly on Fox News, all the way through. And you have other people now, like J.D. Vance or Trump Jr., or Elon Musk, who have big megaphones and are going to and have been taking up exactly the same set of messages. I thought during the last days of the campaign, when Trump said that the Haitians in Springfield, Ohio, were eating pets, and then J.D. Vance echoed him. I thought that was the end of the line. I thought, right. Oh, well, that is just so absurd, so crazy. People are going to laugh at that. But what he does is he digs in. When he says something that is so patently stupid, and unfactual and kind of dangerous and a lie, and J.D. Vance did exactly the same thing. They dug in. And this is what authoritarians do. This is what fascists in the 1930s did. So again, I think that the big question to my mind, Anthony, is over the next really year or 6 months or 2 years, how much will the public actually see of the reality of what's going on? You used to be on computers, you could press something that would reveal the codes, would show you what's actually happening underlying everything. Well, will there be a moment when the people see the emperor has no clothes, when the codes are revealed, when his methodology, his lies, his rapacious and grandiose narcissism is exposed more than it is already.
But all of this could have been dealt with several years ago when he tried to extort Volodymyr Zelensky on the telephone, and he was impeached for it. We have the recording. We've heard it happen. The second impeachment for trying to overturn the election. Again, we watched the insurrection on television, as did he. And the guardrails failed. And so we wouldn't be having to have this conversation now if he had been criminalized for those crimes in the moment. I mean, arguably, the day after January 6th, he could have been led away in handcuffs because we watched him incite the violence, as well as that fake elector scheme and that clearly very planned coup that he had in mind.
And why wasn't he? That is,
well, that was about to be my question to you.
I mean, it wouldn't be January 6th, but it could be January 20th when the Biden administration took over. Why wasn't Merrick Garland, the new attorney general, immediately appointing a special prosecutor, Jack Smith, and immediately building the case against Donald Trump and putting him in at trial right away? I mean, why should we ever have been exposed to this lawlessness? I mean, we see, and America sees, anybody who is sentient sees what has happened. You have somebody who has avoided any legal responsibility for utter treason, for an attempted coup against the United States government. And he's now president.
I think people might think that Brazil was not as advanced as the US, and yet Brazil have criminalized Jair Bolsonaro for his replica, effectively, of January 6th. He's very public coup, banned from ever running for office, I think initially for 8 years, but now it's kind of gone into full effect. They dealt with it in the moment. I mean, is that not an example to how a functioning democracy works? So what are we dealing with?
Well, we cling to, I think, a very important principle in defense of the American system. Let me just say this, that justice is not impatient. Justice takes time. The problem is that if you take too much time with justice, you don't get justice. You get what we have right now. Somebody who is above the law, who looks like and acts like and is essentially above the law, feels that he can get away with anything, and he has got away with anything. Do you remember in 2016 he said, I could shoot somebody in the middle of Fifth Avenue and get away with it. Well, yes, that's exactly right. And that is the metaphoric reality that occurred. That's what he's got away with. And it leaves a terrible legacy. It's what essentially Richard Nixon also said. I mean, he said to David Frost, I don't know if you remember that interview.
Oh, yeah.
He said, if a president does it, it's not illegal. It can't be illegal. Well, at the time Richard Nixon said that, he had been pardoned by Gerald Ford, and many of the people who watched him say that said to themselves, including me, well, he would have been in jail except for that pardon. But
Nixon resigned through pressure, and Trump would never have done anything like that. And exactly. I think that's the difference between these two characters. And in fact, this whole, what we're going through now makes Watergate look like child's play, doesn't it? We have to take another quick break, though, and I want to come back and look at Trump's cabinet picks and what that will mean for America going forward. We'll do that next on The Weekend Show. When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Alo or Allbirds or Skims, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and brilliant marketing, but an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify, and the not-so-secret secret with Shop Pay that boosts conversions by up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going... So, if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling, on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Businesses that sell more sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout that Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/weekend, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/weekend to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/weekend. Welcome back to The Weekend Show. I'm Anthony Davis. Robert Reich, these cabinet picks of Donald Trump, I've watched you in horror responding and reacting to these announcements, including when you heard that Matt Gaetz was potentially going to be the Attorney General. You said, I thought it was a joke. I mean, the whole lot of it seems to be a joke when you take characters like RFK Jr., famous conspiracist, when you take Fox News hosts who are Christian nationalists and have weird views of women in the military and everything that goes with that. You kind of think, well, is this a conspiracy? I mean, is he doing this purposely to upset us as we discussed earlier, or are there greater forces involved? And when I talk about that, I refer to the Kremlin and Russia, and because a lot of these doors do lead to Vladimir Putin, don't they?
Well, to some extent, Russia has to be involved. I mean, there must be, breaking out the champagne in the Kremlin, because they did try to get Donald Trump elected. They tried, we know, in 2016. The Mueller report was very clear about this. And all of the indications are that they try again in 2024. And they obviously succeeded. Why are they so intent on having Donald Trump president? Because Donald Trump will give them what they want, or at least a big part of what they want in Ukraine. And he will get out of NATO, and he will make I think Europe quite vulnerable to Russia's aggression. And he will give Putin a big boost in terms of Putin's own credibility everywhere in the world. But there's something else. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard, for example, Trump's pick for Director of National Intelligence. I don't know why she has parroted Putin's words, almost word for word, when it comes to Ukraine and a lot of other issues. Now, I'm not suggesting that she's a mole or that she's a Putin person, but it is uncanny the extent to which she, as Director of National Intelligence, remember, we're not talking about her being, the Director of Garbage Collection for the District of Columbia. We're talking about her as Director of National Intelligence. She has been a follower of Putin. They put her on Russian television. They've quoted her. They think that she's absolutely fabulous. There has to be something here. I don't know. I tend to be the kind of person that doesn't like conspiracy theories. I don't ever believe them. I think that conspiracy theorists are usually wrong. But one has to wonder, what does Putin have over Trump?
Well, whether it's compromat or not, I don't believe the PP tape storyline, but Trump idolizes Vladimir Putin. And, we saw in Helsinki when he was asked, did you ask the president of Russia if he meddled in the 2016 election? Yes, I asked him, and he said he didn't. Who am I supposed to believe? The man standing next to me or my own security services? So clearly he prefers Putin over America. It keeps happening, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. I mean, this is Donald Trump's entire personality is that of a strong man, as it was originally Mussolini and Franco and Hitler understood that term. That is somebody who is not, who views democracy very cynically. Who doesn't believe in democracy, who believes that all power should be centralized in one person. Donald Trump, I think, has viewed his role in America and American history in that regard. He does like other people around the world, who like Putin, who are strong men.
Viktor Orban, of course, of Hungary.
Viktor Orban. But when Putin originally went into Ukraine, I mean, Trump was very complimentary. He said that's that it takes some courage, and I don't remember the exact.
Called him very smart.
Yes, Putin is very smart.
Yeah.
I mean, and he's going to put into the FBI, the CIA, he already has, and he wants to put into the Director of National Intelligence and the Defense Department people who are not particularly upset, let's put it that way, with Putin or with the aggression that comes with strongmen.
His new choice for Attorney General is Pam Bondi, who is another Trump loyalist, a former kind of lawyer of his, in fact.
Yes, she was Attorney General of Florida.
Yeah.
She has gone to bat for Trump over and over again. In 2016, she was there yelling, lock her up when it came to Hillary Clinton.
Right.
The Attorney General it's a very obviously extremely important role, but it's also important in the sense that the Attorney General is not the president's lawyer. The president is not the client of the Attorney General. The client of the Attorney General is the United States and the people of the United States. Now, whether it is possible for Pam Bondi to make that distinction and understand that when Trump says, I want something, she cannot and she should not and constitutionally must not simply respond to Trump's needs and desires.
But she's going to, though, isn't she? I mean, let's not kid ourselves.
I fear that she will. This is, the one common denominator for all of Trump's picks is not just loyalty. Most presidents want people who are loyal, but subordination.
Right.
The difference between loyalty and subordination is that a subordinate will not ask any questions, will not talk back, even privately. And I think that that's what the real danger is from some of these people.
What you're describing, though, is the authoritarian regime that we've been warning about for the last few years. It's coming to fruition. We're actually seeing it being built. And even in terms of policy, I mean, his picks for his immediate closest advisors is terrifying. White supremacists and people that believe in eugenics and all of this stuff. I mean, we really need to be very careful what we have wished for as a nation.
I don't think we've wished for this, Anthony.
Well, we voted for it, didn't we?
A majority voted for it, but it's not that they want the entire package. And
they just want cheaper groceries, ultimately.
Well, that's right. Yeah. I mean, they were conned, and they believed that they could, live better and have better, their dollars will go further or whatever it is. But no, they did not vote to end democracy and substitute sort of authoritarian or neo-fascism and get rid of the entire civil service and have National Guard or the military go around their communities and trying to flush out anybody who doesn't have the right papers, undocumented people, or have the Justice Department go after Trump's political enemies, Nancy Pelosi and others he has named. No, Americans did not vote for that. And the question that we're debating, I think you and I right now, the kind of subtext is whether when that all begins, whether Americans will just recoil in horror and in the midterm elections of 2026, basically take Congress back.
Do you think there will be midterm elections in 2026?
Yeah, I do. I don't think it's going to be very hard for Donald Trump to wreck Congress or to assume control of Congress. And we see this with the Matt Gaetz nomination. The fact that Republicans stood up to Donald Trump and said, no, we're not going to go with Matt Gaetz. That was a very, very significant moment.
And that was born of us as well, right? Of the people, the outrage, the press and the media, the social media. I mean, it all had an effect, which just if we can, as we head towards the end of this conversation, go in the direction of positivity, that actually people power is often the solution to a lot of these issues.
It has to be the solution. In a democracy, there's no other solution. But what does people power really mean? It means that there is a kind of organized, countervailing power to the dominant sources or centers of power. Now, there is Trump and Trump's administration. But what we've also talked about in this conversation is the power of the big corporations and the major billionaires and campaign contributors behind the throne. Their power also has to be addressed. And if the Democrats don't do it, who is going to do it?
So do you think maybe there will be some kind of uprising in the same way that, in Russia, Alexei Navalny, although he didn't meet a great ending, but at least he represented a people that were terrified of speaking out?
I don't really know. I hope we never get to that point in this country. And anything could happen. I mean, we may look back on these weeks or months before Trump actually takes power and say to ourselves, why didn't we do more to strengthen democratic institutions? Why didn't we prepare against the possibility that Trump would do this or that, or because he's already announced what he's going to do? The Project 2025 has already been very explicit about what he wants to do. And many of the people involved in Project 2025 are already either nominated or they're maneuvering or they're in the background. They're at Mar-a-Lago. I think I have a great deal of faith in the common sense, ultimately, and in the goodwill, ultimately, of the American people. And I've seen a lot. I'm not as young as I used to be. I got in politics. My earliest memories is the campaign of John F. Kennedy against Richard Nixon, and I remember how bad it got in 1968. I remember, the Vietnam War, how many people were injured and killed on both sides, and how hard it was for this country to try to deal with that ghastly reality at the same time that Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy were both assassinated, and the cities were up in flames. Our cities were burning. And at the end of all of that, who was elected president but Richard Nixon? I mean, you couldn't imagine a lower point in American history. But we survived, and I think we came out of it all, maybe, stronger than we were. We'll survive this as well.
So we shouldn't underestimate the opposition to Donald Trump in the form of protest, the free democratic right to protest. We saw it last time when he was president with the women's marches and the BLM marches. And hopefully, I mean, I'm with you on this, that I do believe that Americans are not going to take this lying down.
No. But the protests are only the beginning, the surface phenomenon. It needs organization, mobilization, energy. It needs people who are dedicated to doing the right thing, changing the structure of the economy and the structure of American politics. And it's not easy. It requires dedication for a long period of time. I think this may generate that, Anthony. And when I'm being my most optimistic, I say to myself, well, Kamala Harris would have been a great president and she would have had a great administration, but it would not have catalyzed the degree of change that we need in this country. And maybe we've hit such a low point, or will shortly be hitting such a low point, that will catalyze that change.
Robert Reich, thank you for joining The Weekend Show.
Thank you, Anthony.
I'm Anthony Davis. Don't forget to support me and independent journalism at patreon.com/5Minute News. You can see more from me on the 5 Minute News YouTube channel, and I'll come back next Sunday with a brand new special guest and more factual news to discuss on the 5 Minute News Weekend Show with Midas Touch.